Life has a peculiar way of testing us. Right when the dawn is about to break, the darkness seems most profound. In those final moments before breakthrough, when success lurks just around the corner, an overwhelming number of people do something truly remarkable. They quit. They quit not because they lack talent, not because they lack resources, not because the goal is impossible. They quit because they cannot see how close they truly are to victory. Have you ever watched a child learning to walk? There's a moment just before they master the skill, when they fall more frequently than ever before. Most parents witnessing this crucial stage feel their hearts sink. They worry their child might never walk. But here's the fascinating truth. Those increased falls are actually a sign of imminent success. The child is pushing their boundaries, testing their limits, getting closer and closer to that magical moment when they'll take their first confident steps. This pattern repeats throughout our lives in ways both subtle and profound. Consider the story of a small diner in the Midwest. For 15 years, this humble establishment struggled to stay afloat. The owner worked tirelessly, refusing to compromise on quality, insisting on using fresh local ingredients despite the higher costs. Year after year, they barely broke even. The creditors called, the bills piled up. Friends and family urged them to either change their approach or close down. In their darkest hour, when the weight of 15 years of struggle seemed unbearable, they faced a choice: close the doors forever or push through one more month. They chose to persist. Unknown to them, a renowned food critic had just visited their establishment. The review, published the following week, celebrated their unwavering commitment to quality and authentic flavors. Within a month, lines stretched around the block. The very thing that had seemed like their greatest weakness, their stubborn insistence on quality, became their greatest strength. But what if they had quit? What if, after 14 years and 11 months, they had decided enough was enough? Their story would have ended not with triumph, but with bitter regret. They would have never known how close they were to breakthrough. This phenomenon isn't limited to business. It manifests in every aspect of human endeavor. Think about the struggling artist who destroys their canvas the day before their style would have clicked into place. The writer who abandons their manuscript one chapter before it would have come together. The inventor who gives up on their prototype moments before the final piece would have fallen into place. What makes this pattern so tragically common? The answer lies in understanding how progress really works. We've been conditioned to expect linear progress. Put in X amount of effort, get X amount of results. But real progress, meaningful progress, rarely follows such a neat pattern. Instead, progress often follows what we might call the water bucket principle. Imagine filling a bucket with water, drop by drop. For the longest time, nothing seems to happen. The water accumulates at the bottom, but the bucket appears empty. Then suddenly, with just a few more drops, the water level rises dramatically. Each previous drop was necessary, each contributed to the final result. But the visible progress only became apparent at the very end. Your efforts in life follow a similar pattern. Every step you take, every skill you practice, every challenge you face, they're all drops in your bucket. You might not see the progress day by day, but each effort brings you closer to that critical threshold where everything changes. Consider the story of a young boxer who trained relentlessly for years. Every morning he would run 5 miles before dawn. Every evening he would spend hours perfecting his technique. For 3 years he lost every single amateur match he entered. His family begged him to pursue a different path. His friends stopped coming to his fights, unable to bear witnessing another defeat. But something was happening beneath the surface. Each loss taught him something new. Each defeat forced him to refine his technique, to think more strategically, to become more resilient. Then, in his 4th year, something clicked. He won his first match, then another, and another. Within 6 months, he had become the regional champion. The same opponents who had previously defeated him now couldn't land a single significant blow. What changed? Nothing and everything. The skills had been there, developing gradually, invisibly like water filling that bucket drop by drop. His breakthrough appeared sudden to outside observers, but it was the culmination of thousands of hours of preparation. This brings us to a crucial question. How can you tell if you're on the verge of breakthrough? How do you know if persistence will lead to triumph rather than waste? The answer lies in understanding the subtle signs that often precede major breakthroughs. First, pay attention to the quality of your failures. Are you failing in new and interesting ways, or are you repeating the same mistakes? Progressive failure, failing forward, is often a sign that you're on the right track. Each new type of failure represents a lesson learned, a weakness identified, a skill waiting to be mastered. Second, notice how you feel about your challenges. Does the work, despite its difficulty, feel somehow right? Do you find yourself thinking about it even when you're supposed to be doing other things? This deep engagement, this almost compulsive return to the problem, often indicates you're working on something aligned with your true capabilities and interests. Third, look for what I call micro-improvements. Those tiny shifts in understanding or ability that might not translate to visible success yet, but that change how you see or approach your challenge. These small shifts often precipitate larger breakthroughs, but perhaps most importantly, understand that the moment of greatest resistance often comes just before breakthrough. When everything in you screams to quit, when the path ahead seems impossible, when you feel you've given everything you have and it still isn't enough, that might be the universe's way of testing your resolve one final time before granting you victory. Think about mining for gold. The miners who gave up often did so after digging extensive tunnels, after investing months or years of their lives, after enduring countless hardships. Many abandoned their claims when they were just 3 feet from striking gold. The tragic irony. The next person who acquired the claim and dug those extra 3 feet discovered the fortune that could have been theirs. This isn't just a story about mining. It's a metaphor for every dream abandoned too soon, every goal relinquished when victory was just around the corner. The question isn't whether you have what it takes to succeed. The question is, do you have what it takes to persist through that final crucial stretch when everything seems darkest? Consider this profound truth. Success is not a matter of chance, but a matter of persistence, beyond the point where most would quit. It's about understanding that what feels like the end of your strength might actually be the beginning of your breakthrough. Let me share with you the story of a small manufacturing company that had developed a revolutionary new product. For 2 years, they approached every major retailer in their industry. For 2 years, they heard the same response: no. Their funds were running low. Their investors were losing patience. Their families were questioning their sanity. In their darkest hour, when they had enough money for just one more sales trip, they decided to try one last time. During that final presentation, something different happened. The buyer, unlike all the others, asked detailed questions about their manufacturing process. It turned out this buyer had spent years searching for exactly the type of innovation they had developed. Within 6 months, their product was in stores nationwide. Within a year, they couldn't keep up with demand. What made the difference? Was it luck? Timing? Or was it their refusal to quit despite 2 years of constant rejection? The truth is, each no they received was necessary. Each rejection forced them to refine their presentation, improve their product, and strengthen their resolve. When the right opportunity finally presented itself, they were ready. But here's what most people miss about persistence. It's not just about blindly pushing forward. It's about pushing forward while constantly learning, adapting, and growing. Think of it like crossing a river. You don't just close your eyes and wade straight across. You test each step, adjust your path based on the current, and keep your eyes fixed on the far shore. This brings us to a crucial distinction: the difference between giving up and letting go. Sometimes what looks like persistence is actually stubbornness. The key is to be honest with yourself about whether you're truly growing through your struggles or merely repeating the same mistakes. Ask yourself, are you learning from each setback? Are you adapting your approach based on feedback? Are you getting better even if the results aren't yet visible? If the answer is yes, then you're not just persisting, you're progressing. Let me tell you about a teacher who struggled with a particularly challenging class. Every conventional teaching method had failed. The students were disengaged, disruptive, and falling behind. Other teachers had given up on the class, labeling them as unteachable. But this teacher refused to accept that label. Instead of giving up, they tried something unconventional. They began teaching history through drama, mathematics through music, literature through art. At first, it seemed like chaos. The principal questioned their methods. Parents complained about the unconventional approach. For months, there was no visible improvement in test scores or behavior. Then, gradually, something began to change. Students who had never participated began raising their hands. Children who had been labeled as problems revealed hidden talents. By the end of the year, this unteachable class had achieved the highest improvement rate in the school's history. What made the difference? The teacher's refusal to quit was important, but it wasn't the whole story. What mattered was their willingness to persist while simultaneously questioning their assumptions, adapting their methods, and maintaining an unwavering belief in their students' potential. This brings us to another vital truth. The moment when most people quit is often the moment when they should be doubling down on their efforts. Why? Because resistance, difficulty, and doubt are not always signs that you're on the wrong path. Sometimes they're signs that you're about to break through to a new level. Boiling water. As the temperature rises, nothing appears to happen for a long time. The water gets warmer, but it looks the same. Then, just before it reaches boiling point, the surface begins to tremble. Bubbles form at the bottom of the pot. If you didn't understand the process, you might think something was wrong. But those bubbles and that trembling surface aren't signs of failure. They're harbingers of transformation. Your journey works the same way. The obstacles you face, the doubts that plague you, the resistance you encounter, these might not be warnings to stop. They might be indicators that you're on the verge of breakthrough. But how do you maintain faith in your journey when everything seems to be falling apart? How do you find the strength to take one more step when you feel you've already given everything you have? The answer lies in understanding that your greatest growth often comes from your greatest challenges. Each obstacle you face is not just a test of your resolve, it's an opportunity to develop strength you didn't know you had. Consider the butterfly emerging from its chrysalis. The struggle to break free is not just about getting out, it's about developing the strength necessary for flight. If you were to help the butterfly by breaking open the chrysalis, you would actually doom it. The very struggle that seems cruel is actually essential for its survival. Your struggles serve a similar purpose. They're not just obstacles to overcome, they're opportunities to develop the strength, wisdom, and character you'll need for the journey ahead. The resistance you face today is preparing you for the opportunities of tomorrow. There's a critical moment in every worthwhile endeavor when you'll face what I call the ultimate test. It's that moment when everything you've worked for seems to be crumbling around you. When logic, fear, and exhaustion all whisper the same seductive message. Give up. You've done enough. No one would blame you for quitting now. This is the moment that separates those who achieve their dreams from those who spend their lives wondering what if. This is the moment when champions are made, not in the spotlight, but in the darkness of their deepest doubts. Let me share with you the story of a small family farm. For generations, this farm had sustained the family through good times and bad. Then came the drought. Not just any drought, but the kind that turns the earth to dust and hope to ashes. The first year was difficult. The second year was devastating. By the third year, their neighbors had all sold their land and moved away. Every morning, the farmer would walk his fields before dawn, studying the sky for any sign of rain. Every evening he would review his dwindling resources, trying to stretch them just a little further. The bank threatened foreclosure. Friends urged him to sell while he still could. His own family questioned his sanity. But something deep inside him refused to give up. Instead of selling, he began experimenting with new farming techniques. He studied weather patterns from decades past. He dug deeper wells, learning from the ancient wisdom of those who had farmed this land centuries before. He worked through the night, sleeping only when exhaustion demanded it. Then, just when things seemed darkest, when he was down to his last resources, something remarkable happened. The new farming techniques he had developed out of desperation proved more efficient than traditional methods. The deeper wells he had dug tapped into an aquifer that would sustain his crops even in the driest seasons. The very drought that threatened to destroy him had forced him to innovate in ways that would ultimately transform his farm into one of the most successful in the region. This farmer's story teaches us something profound about the nature of persistence. True persistence isn't just about enduring, it's about evolving. It's about letting your challenges transform you into someone capable of achieving what once seemed impossible. But here's what most people get wrong about transformation. They expect it to feel good. They expect to feel confident, assured, powerful. The truth is, transformation usually feels like destruction. It feels like everything you thought you knew is being challenged. Everything you thought you were is being questioned. How a seed becomes a tree. First, the seed must crack open and be destroyed as a seed. If it could think and feel, it might believe it was dying rather than transforming. The very process that gives it new life would feel like destruction. Your moments of greatest growth often feel the same way. When you're on the verge of breakthrough, it rarely feels like victory is around the corner. Instead, it feels like everything is falling apart. This is why so many people quit just before their breakthrough moment. Consider the story of a small publishing house that specialized in children's books. For years, they struggled to compete with larger publishers. They couldn't match the marketing budgets of their competitors. They couldn't offer the same advances to authors. They couldn't afford the same quality of paper or binding. But they had one thing their competitors didn't. They genuinely cared about creating books that would ignite children's imagination. They spent countless hours working with authors to perfect their stories. They invested what little money they had in finding talented but unknown illustrators. They read every manuscript aloud to groups of children, watching their reactions and taking notes. For 10 years, they operated on the edge of bankruptcy. Then, just when things seemed hopeless, when they were down to their last few months of operating capital, something extraordinary happened. Parents began noticing that their children insisted on reading these books again and again. Teachers reported that these were the books their students chose most often during free reading time. Librarians noticed these books rarely stayed on the shelves. The very things that had seemed like disadvantages, their small size, their intensive focus on quality, their willingness to spend time perfecting each book became their greatest strengths. Their commitment to excellence, maintained through years of struggle, had created something unique and valuable in the marketplace. But what if they had quit in year 9? What if they had decided after a decade of struggle that it was time to be realistic and give up their dream? They would have never known that success was just months away. This brings us to a crucial understanding about the nature of breakthrough moments. They rarely announce themselves in advance. You never know which step will be the one that changes everything. You never know which no will lead to the crucial yes. You never know which experiment will lead to the breakthrough. That's why it's so crucial to treat every step, every attempt, every day as if it could be the one that changes everything. Because it might be. The day you decide to quit might be the day before everything would have changed. But this raises an important question. How do you maintain this level of commitment when you're exhausted, when you're discouraged, when everything seems to be telling you to quit? The answer lies in understanding the difference between motivation and commitment. Motivation is a feeling. Like all feelings, it comes and goes. Some days you'll feel motivated, other days you won't. But commitment is a decision. It's a promise you make to yourself that you'll continue moving forward, regardless of how you feel. This is why it's so important to build what I call persistence infrastructure, the habits, routines, and support systems that keep you moving forward when motivation fails. It's about creating an environment that makes it easier to persist than to quit, a ship crossing the ocean. The captain doesn't rely on feeling inspired or motivated. Instead, they rely on instruments, maps, and proven procedures. They have systems in place to handle storms, equipment failures, and other challenges. Your journey requires the same level of systematic preparation. Let's talk about something that few people understand about success: the deceptive nature of breakthrough moments. We often think of breakthroughs as dramatic, obvious events, moments when the heavens open and success rains down like a summer storm. But real breakthroughs often come disguised as setbacks, wrapped in the clothing of apparent failure. Consider the story of a small bakery in a quiet neighborhood. Every morning for 15 years, the baker would arrive before dawn to prepare fresh bread and pastries. The shop never made much money, but it had a loyal following of customers who appreciated the quality of his work. One morning, his ancient oven, the heart of his business, finally broke down completely. He had no savings to replace it. No bank would give him a loan. It seemed like the end of everything he had worked for. But instead of closing shop, he did something unexpected. He began baking in small batches in a tiny countertop oven, making only enough for his most loyal customers. These smaller batches required him to adjust his recipes. He had to be more precise, more careful with his ingredients. He started experimenting with new techniques to make the most of the limited space. And something unexpected happened. These new, smaller batches were better than anything he had ever made before. The limitations forced him to perfect his craft in ways that would have never occurred to him otherwise. Word spread about these extraordinary new creations. Soon, people were lining up around the block, willing to wait hours for a chance to try his bread. What seemed like a disaster, the breakdown of his old oven, turned out to be the catalyst for his greatest success. This pattern repeats itself across every field of human endeavor. What appears to be a setback often contains within it the seeds of breakthrough. But to access these opportunities, you must be willing to persist past the point where others would quit. The nature of any worthwhile goal. If it were easy to achieve, everyone would have done it already. The very fact that it's difficult, that it requires persistence beyond the ordinary, is what makes it valuable. The obstacles you face aren't impediments to your success. They're the reason your success will be meaningful. Let me share another story that illustrates this principle. There was a violin maker who had spent decades perfecting his craft. He used traditional methods passed down through generations, taking months to complete each instrument. While other manufacturers could produce dozens of violins in the time it took him to make one, he refused to compromise on quality. Year after year, he barely made enough to survive. His competitors mocked his old-fashioned methods. Stores refused to stock his instruments, saying they were too expensive. But he noticed something interesting. Professional musicians would occasionally visit his shop, testing his violins with a look of wonder on their faces. These musicians began telling others about his work. Soon, orchestra leaders from around the country were visiting his small shop. What had seemed like his greatest weakness, his unwillingness to compromise on quality, became his greatest strength. The very things that made his path difficult were the things that eventually led to his success. But here's what's fascinating about his story. If you had looked at his situation a week before his breakthrough, you would have seen a man who appeared to be failing. His methods seemed outdated, his business barely surviving. Yet he was actually on the verge of extraordinary success. This brings us to a crucial understanding about the nature of persistence. It's not just about duration, it's about depth. It's about being willing to dig deeper into your craft, your art, your business, when others would settle for superficial success. How diamonds are formed. They require not just pressure, but pressure maintained over time. Remove either element, the pressure or the time, and you end up with something less than a diamond. Your dreams require the same combination of sustained effort and time. But there's something else about diamonds that's relevant to our discussion. They're formed in darkness, deep beneath the Earth's surface. You can't see them being formed. You can't measure their daily progress. You just have to trust the process. Your growth often follows the same pattern. The most important changes happen beneath the surface, invisible to others and sometimes even to yourself. This is why it's so crucial to develop what I call inner metrics, ways of measuring your progress that don't depend on external validation. Ask yourself, are you thinking about your challenges in new ways? Are you developing new skills even if you haven't mastered them yet? Are you becoming more resilient, more resourceful, more determined? These internal changes often precede external success. Consider the story of a small restaurant that specialized in traditional cooking methods. While other establishments modernized their kitchens and streamlined their menus, this restaurant maintained its commitment to time-honored techniques. Every sauce was made from scratch. Every dish was prepared with attention to detail that seemed almost obsessive. For years they struggled. Their prices had to be higher to cover the cost of their ingredients and methods. Their service was slower because they refused to rush the cooking process. They lost customers to faster, cheaper competitors. But they also noticed something. The customers who did appreciate their food became fiercely loyal. These loyal customers began bringing their friends. Those friends brought others. Slowly, steadily, their reputation grew. Food critics began visiting, drawn by rumors of their unwavering commitment to quality. What had seemed like stubborn adherence to outdated methods was recognized as a preservation of essential culinary arts. The very things that had made their path difficult, their insistence on traditional methods, their refusal to cut corners, became the foundation of their success. But here's the crucial point. If they had quit during those difficult years, they would have never discovered that their greatest challenges contained the seeds of their greatest achievements. This pattern holds true across every field of human endeavor. The very things that make your path difficult often contain within them the elements that will make your success meaningful and lasting. But to access these opportunities, you must be willing to persist past the point where others would quit. There's a moment in every great endeavor that I call the final furnace. It's that moment when everything you've worked for is tested in the hottest fires of adversity. It's the moment when giving up seems not just reasonable but almost wise. Understanding this moment, and more importantly, learning to push through it, is perhaps the most crucial skill you can develop. Let me share with you the story of a small theater company that had dedicated itself to bringing classical plays to rural communities. For years, they traveled from town to town, performing in school gymnasiums, community centers, and sometimes even in barns. They lived on donations, sleeping in their vehicles or on the floors of kind strangers who believed in their mission. Their performances were often met with skepticism. Many nights they performed for audiences of less than a dozen people. They watched their savings dwindle. They endured countless hardships. But they noticed something remarkable. In every town, there would be at least one person, often a young person, whose eyes would light up with recognition of the power of great theater. In their darkest hour, when they were down to their last few dollars, they had to make a choice: give up their dream and return to conventional lives, or push forward into complete uncertainty. They chose to continue, not because they were certain of success, but because they had come to understand that their work mattered in ways they couldn't measure. What they didn't know was that word of their dedication had been spreading. Teachers began organizing field trips around their performances. Community leaders in various towns started pooling resources to support their visits. A regional arts foundation had been watching their work and was preparing to offer them a substantial grant. The very moment when they were closest to giving up was the moment when years of persistent effort were about to bear fruit. This is a pattern that repeats itself so often it cannot be coincidence. It's as if the universe itself tests our resolve one final time before granting us victory. But why? Why does success so often wait until after this moment of supreme testing? The answer lies in understanding that success isn't just about achieving a goal. It's about becoming the kind of person capable of achieving and maintaining that success. How gold is refined. The heat must be hot enough to burn away all impurities. If the temperature is too low, or if the process is cut short, the gold remains contaminated. Your dreams, your goals, your deepest aspirations, they require the same level of refinement. The challenges you face aren't just obstacles to overcome. They're the very process by which you become capable of handling success. Consider the story of a small choir in a struggling community. They had no formal training, no fancy auditorium, no sophisticated equipment. What they had was dedication and a willingness to practice until every note was perfect. They would rehearse in basements, in garages, wherever they could find space. For years, they performed at local events, often being overlooked or underappreciated. But they refused to lower their standards. They continued to challenge themselves with increasingly complex pieces. They supported each other through personal hardships, through doubts, through countless moments when giving up would have been easier than going on. Then came their moment of supreme testing. They were invited to perform at a prestigious competition, but several key members fell ill just days before the event. They had a choice: withdraw from the competition or completely rearrange their program at the last minute. They chose to persist, staying up all night to rework their entire performance. What happened next seems like a miracle, but it was actually the natural result of years of preparation meeting opportunity. Their performance, born of desperation and determination, had a raw authenticity that touched everyone in the audience. The very limitations that seemed like disadvantages became the source of their unique power. This is the paradox of persistence. Often the moments that seem like failure are actually the precursors to breakthrough. The obstacles that appear to be blocking your path are actually forming your path. But how do you know? How do you tell the difference between a challenge that's refining you and one that's defeating you? The answer lies in asking yourself one crucial question. Are you still growing? Not are you succeeding, not are you achieving your goals, but are you growing? If you're growing, if you're learning, adapting, developing new strengths and insights, then you're not failing, regardless of what external circumstances might suggest. You're in the process of becoming something more than you were before. This brings us to a fundamental truth about success. It's not an event, it's a process. More specifically, it's a process of becoming. Every challenge you face, every setback you endure, every moment of doubt you push through. These are not obstacles to your success, they are the very substance of your success. The nature of any significant achievement, the achievement itself, crossing the finish line, making the breakthrough, reaching the goal, that's just a moment. What matters is who you become in the process of pursuing that achievement. That transformation is the real achievement. This is why quitting just before breakthrough is so tragic. It's not just that you miss out on the success that was just around the corner. It's that you miss out on the final transformation that would have made that success meaningful and sustainable. Remember the water bucket principle we discussed earlier? How progress often seems invisible until a critical threshold is reached. The same principle applies to personal growth. You may not see the changes day by day, but each effort, each challenge faced, each moment of persistence is adding to your capacity. You are, right now, either building the strength that will carry you to your dreams, or you're letting that strength slip away. There is no middle ground. Every moment of persistence counts. Every decision to continue when you could quit matters. And here's the most profound truth of all. The moment when you feel most like quitting is often the moment when persistence matters most. It's in these moments of supreme testing that your character is forged, your strength is built, and your future is determined. You may be standing at such a moment right now. You may be facing challenges that seem insurmountable. You may be wondering if persistence is worth the price it demands. Let me tell you with absolute conviction, if you're growing, if you're learning, if you're pushing yourself beyond what you thought possible, then you're not just persisting, you're prevailing. The breakthrough you seek may be just around the corner. The dawn may be just about to break. The transformation you've been working toward may be almost complete. Don't quit now. Not when you've come so far. Not when you've endured so much. Not when you're so close to discovering what you're truly capable of achieving. The choice is yours. It always has been. You can quit, as most people do, when the pressure becomes intense. Or you can persist, as champions do, until persistence itself becomes your greatest strength. The difference between history's greatest achievements and its most tragic might-have-beens often comes down to this simple but profound choice: the decision to persist when persistence seems impossible. Your moment of breakthrough may be closer than you think. The question is, will you be there to meet it?